I'm not sure if you can hear that actually. Luke, can you hear anything playing? Oh, it's not playing for me, so. But if you can hear it, then that's the main thing.
Very dramatic. I love it.
I'm getting a bit emotional already.
Folks, yeah, well, we're good. I'm going to give another 30 seconds or so. Chris and people joining from the waiting room, and then we'll formally get started. But Christian in the chat says it sounds brilliant, so that's great. This bit of load awkward. I normally have something, a question about the. Did you watch the football last night? Any Man United fans here giving up the Europa League to watch this? Or Rangers fans? Rangers playing tonight. Okay, I think that's. Oh no, one more person jumped in. Brilliant. Well, I hope if you can see and hear everything okay, folks, please do drop a comment and let us know the usual jazz as to where you are and what's occurring. And we will get started. For those of you who this is your first time joining, I'm Luke. I'm the W Club manager. You can see I'm in a bit of a different getup than usual tonight. And it's actually New Year, new me. I'm joining some sort of religious order and going knocking doors with Bibles. No, I'm joking. This is because it's a really special night. It's our second every year running the W Club Awards. The first time we've done one of these tastings where we've gotten everyone together to actually try the winners afterwards. So that's really, really exciting. And kind of a unique opportunity. I'm sure most of you on the chat, and do let us know in the comments if you were at one of the blind tastings. We were saying before, and we had several hundred W Club members all over from London to Edinburgh to with Nottingham, York, Manchester. So they were all over the country. People were trying these whiskies, all blind, so no idea what they were tasting. Just with a little category and whiskey number on it, and the results are kind of compiled and averaged out, and we have our winners. So it's 100% member-led tasting, no branding, no kind of behind scenes brown paper envelopes or handshakes or margin decisions. These are all selected by you guys. So it's a really, really special event. For everyone who's on this tasting, you'll get 15% off all these whiskies afterwards to buy the usual Digital Drams discount, but also any of the as you may have seen already on the website, any of the winners or gold medalists, either in store or online, you get 10% off them until next September. This September. So if you fancy any of them, even from the categories from the gold medalists that we're not trying tonight, do keep an eye and watch that. So unless anyone's got anything to say quickly in the chat, and we do want to keep, even though we're doing a kind of a different format tonight with multiple people on representing their brands, we do want to keep your kind of usual comments and questions and feedback coming in the chat. So please do. We're going to start with the black bottle, which was the winner of the blended category. There's a lot to talk about in terms of this win. So this is in terms of the quality of the whiskey and how it won and what it beat, which is exciting. But for the meantime, I'll let Luke Fenton from in to have a chat, introduce the whiskey. First, I'm going to say, Luke, congratulations on your category win. A great achievement.
Yeah, no, honestly, thank you so much, Luke, and genuinely, thank you to the guys, all the people on the call, I'm sure, and went and tasted this particular whiskey. Black Bottle is one of those. I would probably call it a hidden secret in terms of the blended whiskey category, and it's often forgotten in the whiskey world that blended whiskey, in terms of Scotland's exports and what it is we do for Scotch whiskey, is usually about 90% of the category in terms of Scotch whiskey. We all tend to forget about it, and the big boys, the Johnny Walkers, the Ballantines, etc. They always get the credit for that, and so they should, because they're producing excellent products. But as you said, it was a blind tasting we did for Black Bottle, And just about the company that owns the brand that is Black Bottle, we are called CVH Spirits. We used to be Distill International. We are the custodians of Bunnahabhain on Islay, Deanston up in Stirling, and we're also the custodians of Tobermory and Leitchik on the Isle of Mull. We don't actually own a grain distillery, which is quite unusual for a brand that runs a blended whiskey. So as a result, a happy result, if you ask me, is that there's such a high malt content within Black Bottle that allows us to produce a spirit that quite often flies under the radar. But then when people get it liquid on lips and in a neutral environment, you're going to get a lot of love for it, a lot of love for it. And it's 1879, so we're not talking about a small amount of history here. We're talking about something that developed during that sort of blended whiskey explosion within Scotland. The big brands that are in there all sort of happened at that time as well. And it was all to take on, and I appreciate the company present. There's folks here from Bushmills in Ireland, but we were in a sort of competitive war in terms of selling whiskey in the world with Irish companies. Irish whiskey tends to be a lot sweeter, and it tends to be triple distilled, and it produces a much smoother spirit. And the reason why blended Scotch, and we should never ever turn our noses up at blended Scotch. It's a skill to make a product from grain and malt from several distilleries to bring it together in something that's so interesting and so easy to drink. And Black Bottle has been one of those things that has been revered throughout its time as something that's interesting and something that's delicious and something that's very, very drinkable. Whether you're drinking it neat, you're drinking it with ice, you're popping it in a cocktail, you're popping with some soda in there, you're popping some ginger ale. And it's just one of those things. So I'm just going to say, get your noses straight in there. I hate these tastings where someone kind of lags on for a huge amount of time. Get your noses in there, and you're going to recognize that malt content straight away. Having the ability to have, I'm wearing my Bunnahabhain t-shirt this evening for a reason, is that we have a lot of malt from Bunnahabhain. Bunnahabhain is known for its unpeated, heavily sherried whiskey, but we do peated Bunnahabhain, and there is a lot of peated Bunnahabhain in here. There is a little bit of peated grain, but most of it is actually peated malt that you're getting through there. It's a little bit softer. It's not necessarily island malt. It's not that TCP, that medicinal kind of smoke that you're getting to it. It tends to be that kind of softer, more rounded. There's definitely sherry in there, and like just look at the color of it for a start. This is a non-age statement, blended malt, blended Scotch, and I think it's an absolute bang for your buck in terms of blended malt, blended Scotch, sorry. And Black Bottle has so many rumors surrounding it. Most of them true, by the way. If you've heard rumors, it's probably true. And one of them being that the guys on Islay that have all those distilleries there, they've got football clubs that play against each other. So the teams at the distilleries have five-a-side. And at the end of the day, they all tend to have a dram of Black Bottle. And the reason being is that most of the time, every single one of their malts is probably in that blend of Scotch whiskey. And we are a little bit more expensive than the mainstream guys, and there's a reason for that. We don't have a grain distillery here at CVH Spirits. We have to buy in our grain whiskey, and we're not ashamed by that. We're trying to keep a blend on the go. The skill surrounding blended whiskey is making it consistent, and single malt's fine. Single cask is easier. You just pull stuff out of a cask and put it in a bottle, and it's different every single time. Single malt, still quite difficult. You've got to get the 12-year-old, the 18-year-old, the 15-year-old, whatever, the same every single time from the same distillery using one kind of malt at a certain degree of peatiness or not. With blended Scotch, you're taking whiskey, grain and malt from various distilleries of various ages and turning it into something that's consistent. There's a reason why Black Bottle's still going. It's popular. It's recognized. It's one of those things that is so highly coveted, and yeah, these days a lot more expensive than some of the other blended Scotch whiskies. But I honestly think it flies below the radar in the right kind of way. And there's a reason why it's won an award, and you guys picked it. And it's got such a high malt content that you'll recognize that. There's a lot of Bunnahabhain in there. There's a lot of sherry. There's a lot of malt. I'm not supposed to share this information, but I will because it's you guys. And for those of you that have been on my tastings before, you're probably 60, 70% malt whiskey in here compared to other blended whiskies, which will be down in the sort of 40s, 45s, 30s, etc. And it's a brand that I don't have to worry about too much. It always sits on the bar, but it needs a new audience that doesn't necessarily know about that particular brand because people have been a little bit snobby about malt whiskey and not necessarily going for the blends. This one, I think, deserves all the credit that you guys have given it. So how we knows? I think on the nose, it doesn't come across as too PC.
No,
And
not at
it's
all.
it's definitely not that TCP, that medicinal. It's definitely sort of more rounded. And you definitely pick up a little bit of sherry in there. And then the taste. You've got a mouthfeel to it. And mouthfeel is so important with blended Scotch. You don't want something to be thin. We talk a lot about mouthfeel when it comes to Deanston, which is one of our other brands. Deanston is waxy, and if you've been on my tastings about Deanston within the W Club, you'll understand what I'm talking about. Luke, in particular, I'm sure you've come across this waxy thing. About 40% of what we do at Deanston actually goes to blend. We'll not talk about the blends, Johnny Walker, but Deanston produces a mouthfeel. It's something that's a little bit robust and it holds up and attaches other flavors to it. And we've tried to replicate this with Black Bottle, where we're just custodians of a brand here. We don't have a distillery, it doesn't have a home necessarily, but it does have a history and it does have a love. And yeah, I think that's the best way to think about Black Bottle. It's old enough to rival some of the smaller distilleries these days and things like that. And I think it's a great testament to the Scotch whisky industry in general. We're across all of the continents now with Black Bottle, and it's an absolute privilege to be awarded best in category from you guys. So yeah, wonderful stuff. What do you think, Luke?
Marvelous. Well, it'd be great to hear. That's a brilliant introduction, Luke. And while people sip away, it'd be great to hear from everyone saying hello in the chat, guys. Great to hear your kind of thoughts on Black Bottle. We do have one already. Andrew said, I was in Islay last year and all the locals in the pub were drinking Black Bottle. There's a wee tip in itself. Also, I was actually talking to my partner before coming on this tasting. She used to work for Deanston when it was Burn Stewart, so even before Distill. And she always thought that the Black Bottle was horrendously underrated as a blend. And that it was really good quality. People who come on these tastings often know I go on about sort of value for money and whiskey and bang for your buck. And I know you said it's maybe slightly more expensive than some blends, but I think this is it's not too bad. I mean, I don't think it's not overly expensive. We're selling it at £32 normally. For everyone on this call who gets 15% off, will get it for £27.50 with that discount. So I think it's a good dram for that. And also in terms of what it beat in there, you were saying best in category. So the category was blended whiskey. I won't go into all the whiskies that entered and didn't make a place. But there were some big names in there as well. But the gold medalist will give you an idea. So Black Bottle 10-year-old you beat, which is obviously the older, bigger brother of this. Johnny Walker Black Label and Johnny Walker Blue Label. So that's what it was up against. Just non-age statement blends, regardless of price point. So it's a testament to what W Clubbers felt about it during the tasting experience. We also have Kevin and Kev saying pleasant, smooth, subtle, mature tasting dram, good value. And Greg says my first experience of BB, which is good. So
it's honestly humbling to come across the other people who are in that category. I mean, the next one is obviously us at 10 years old, and if you come across Black Bottle 10 years old, it's an age statement applied, and you do get a slightly more mature, slightly more sophisticated blended Scotch in that. But we don't have the big budgets. We don't have the £8 million, £80 million place on Princess Street in Edinburgh for what it is we do. We let the big guys shout about blended whiskey, and so they should. It's such a big part of the Scotch whisky industry in Scotland, and to be even in the same category sometimes is very, very humbling. But the reason why the malt content of our whiskey is so high is that, like I said, we don't have a grain distillery, and grain distillery is continuous distillation, not using malt, whether it be wheat or whether it be corn or whatever, forming that sort of base for blended Scotch. And it was cheaper for us just to kind of pop in some Bunnahabhain or pop in some Deanston or pop in some malts from some of the other wonderful distilleries out on Islay. And I think Black Bottle is one of those things you can give to someone that says, I don't like whiskey or I don't like peated whiskey. And it forms like a nice wee bridge into that world of a little bit of peat, a little bit of sweetness. And yeah, it's just one of those things that I think flies under the radar in the right way. That those of us in the know, all of you in this chat, tend to pick up on. And I think Black Bottle really does pick up on those things. And you'll see on the Whisky Shop website there are variations of Black Bottle. You've got the Black Bottle 10. We also did the I think it's now sold out, so I do apologize for advertising this without it being available, but it might come back. Is our Andean Oak. So we've finished some Black Bottle whiskey in Andean Oak, which is from the Andes. And you get this really lovely sort of smoked almonds and hazelnuts out of it. It's really, really diverse. And Black Bottle is, I don't know, it's one of these things that we kind of excel at CVH Spirits, of putting things into really high quality casks and coming out with very high quality whiskey. And especially with blended Scotch, you really need to focus on the quality of your casks. So our casks, mainly bourbon casks, for Black Bottle, come from Kentucky, and we use that across the range within CVH Spirits. So there'd be Deanston, whether it be Bunnahabhain, whether it be Tobermory, and yeah, I think it just really holds an amazing quality to it. And I hope you all agree. And it's not just to do with having it neat. Honestly, if you've got your sample there and you put a bit of ginger ale in there, you put a bit of mixer, whether that be tonic or soda or Coca-Cola or whatever, Black Bottle shines through. It really, really does. It makes a great cocktail. And it's just one of those things that a little bit of diversity in whiskey is not a bad thing. And yeah, I think it cuts the mustard that way.
Yeah. No, definitely. I mean, a couple of people had said it'd be there in the chat. Ashley says on the write-up online, it says good with Coke or ginger beer. I just checked. That's actually not what it says on our website, just to clarify. But Greg says should be good in cocktails. Leon says can smell smoky bacon on the nose, and then honey with spicy, light BB this dram. Great whiskey, light, lovely, floral, and this is my first time. Hi from Embleton, Northumberland. So thanks for joining, Andrew. And I'm glad you're enjoying it. Just to clarify on the gold medals, this is for every category. The gold medalists aren't placed in any order, so we don't, they're just all, there could be a big gap between them or no gap. They're just no order. So and also on what you were saying, Luke, if anyone from Diageo's watching, Princess Street is fantastic. I really enjoyed the free beer and cocktails, and if you've any Six Nations tickets, go and give me a call. So
shameless, Luke.
But
absolutely shameless.
Yeah, no, it's really great, and it's great to see you getting such good feedback in the chat. Before we move on, Luke, is there anything else you wanted to add? I suppose actually the other question I had, which I was told to ask you going into this by a W Club member who can't join tonight, was about the bottle itself, which is obviously, even by the standard of some blends, quite unique, and about has the recipe changed over the years, especially with the changes in ownerships and different things?
Yeah, I'll start with the bottle. So originally, Black Bottle was served in a black bottle, as you would expect, and that's where the name comes from. sadly, obviously, during the First World War, the things that makes black glass were required for gunpowder, and that was very, very handy for taking on Jerry. And actually, at the same time, the black glass was produced in Germany, so the bottle changed to green. So you will see older bottles of black bottle in a green bottle with a black bottle label. In I think it was 1995, we changed back to the black glass. And the thing about making black glass is it's actually quite difficult. So this is actually purple glass. You can't see it unless you cut the bottle in half and look through a single pane of the glass. And we did that for two reasons. A, to go back to brand, and B, one of our other brands is Bunnahabhain, which is also in black glass. So just producing glass in a certain way makes things cheaper. You don't want to be spending money on glass when you're buying whiskey. You want to be spending money on liquid. So just making that process a little bit more streamlined allowed us to A, return to black glass, and B, get the cost price down, and make sure that it's correct on the shelf. In terms of the liquid has changed over the years. There's a couple of reasons for that. There's the taste buds of everyone in the market, the guys like yourselves that buy it, and also there is an aspect of what the master blender wants to do with the particular brand, and what casks are available to us to make that blended Scotch. So it used to be a hell of a lot smokier, and if you can still buy these things from whiskey shop or various other outlets, is the older and pre-1997 black bottle whiskey, and you will get a little bit of a smokier aspect to it. But at the same time, we think we've done so well since 1879 in keeping relatively consistent, which is quite difficult considering how whiskey has come on and how we do more single malt and all that sort of stuff. So the spirit itself has changed. In terms of the cocktail front, there's something so easy and so recommendable to you all. Somebody mentioned like smoky bacon before. If you make an old fashioned using black bottle whiskey, maple syrup instead of sugar syrup, and a little bit of Angostura bitters, whether it be orange or aromatic, you get this lovely kind of maple bacon old fashioned, and it's so easy to make. It's most people probably have maple syrup in the cupboard rather than sugar syrup. Give it a try. Just a traditional recipe, the same parts, and you're going to get something that's really, really interesting in a black bottle.
That's a really good tip. Are you diluting the maple syrup into a syrup or just using it as it is?
Just fire it in there. Like the one thing about black bottle is it's not delicate. It's not to be pussyfooted about. You want the flavor of that whiskey in there. You're just adding a teaspoonful at most of maple syrup. Give it a stir down, then add your ice, stir it down some more. Then you're diluting with the ice as you would with an old fashioned, and adding your bitters in there as you go. And honestly, it's one of the best old fashions. And if you're a whiskey fan, you must love an old fashioned. I can see it on all of your faces, looking around, going, "Yeah, that's fine, an old fashioned." But it's something somebody who works in the whiskey industry, people come around and just kind of expect you to have whiskey in the house. Most of the time, I'm just serving them black bottle, and they love it.
Yeah, I have different tiers of whiskeys for people who come over, depending if I think they know whiskey or not. They're all good. They're all good whiskeys. It's just whether or not they need to be impressed by the brand.
Well,
or whether or
my
not I can
favorite
just
is
serve the
to
whiskey.
honestly give them a blind tasting and put black bottle in amongst the malts, and 9 times out of 10, somebody really can't tell because the malt content's
As
that high.
this tonight is testament to, I suppose.
Absolutely. But yeah, no. Again, thank you all for voting for Black Bottle, and I hope you've all enjoyed your drams there. And the folks that haven't tried it before, I hope it's been an experience. But otherwise, enjoy. Absolutely enjoy.
Marvelous. No, really, really thanks for coming on, Luke. And before you go, Ian has asked to remind us what year the green bottles changed black again. I know you said it was World War II, but when did it go back to black?
World War One. So
World War One. All right.
They stopped making black bottle glass in 1914. It used to come in a black flask that was like in a half glass, and it had like a metal rim around it. I mean, it's a very cool bottle that nobody makes these days. And then when we kind of switched back, and I think it was 1986, back into black glass. And when I say black glass, you're either dealing with really dark green or really dark purple. There's no such thing as black glass, but one of those components is used in gunpowder, which was obviously key in a world war.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I can imagine some explosive drams coming there. The Andrew's got offered Scotland Wales tickets today, so fair play to you, Scotland. Or fair play to you, Andrew. Is that the one? I know there's a game tomorrow night, but I'm not sure if that's the Scotland one or not. And yeah, Chris has said the last time I tried Black Bottle it was under the Burnt Stewart blend, and this one's much, much better. So
Well,
marvelous.
no, I'll feed that back to the guys that do the liquid side of things because they'll be happy to hear that.
Perfect. Well, brilliant. Well, thank you very much for coming on, Luke, and do stick around if you want. And yeah, that's great. It's yeah, brilliant having you on. So
Thanks
brilliant.
again for
So
having me.
sorry.
I said thanks again for having me.
No,
I'll leave you
brilliant.
to it, and I'll have some jams now with everyone else whilst the rest of them do some work.
Marvelous. Well, speaking of the rest of them doing some work, up next, we have, moving on from our blend, we have our blended malt. So the winner for that was Noble Rebel Smoke Symphony. So Gary, I believe you're the man to come on to for this. So congratulations on your win, Gary.
Thanks, Luke. Evening all. How are we all?
Yeah,
You all good
everyone's
tonight?
great, I suppose. Presume lots of thumbs up there. So do we can't hear you folks,
So.
but we can see you wave. So do that.
Yeah, no, listen, it's a pleasure to be on here with all these guys and amongst these esteemed whiskies, and I think just echoing a lot of what Luke said earlier on, I think to be voted for the way that the awards are run with the blind tasting and just to be voted for by the folk that we ultimately make the whiskey for. Do you know what I mean? These are the whiskey drinkers that is it's why we do the job, and we all pretty much enjoy drinking it too. Um, so yeah, Noble Rebel, Smoke Symphony. I'm forgetting I'm blurred, so that's an absolutely pointless endeavour of me to just
Well,
try
I've
and
I've
show
got
you
a
that.
bottle of it here behind me, so I can hold it up.
Thanks, thanks, Luke. So Noble Rebel is a relatively recent brand from the Loch Lomond Group. It's only been out for I think maybe just 2 years now, and it's a range of three blended malts. Where Luke's got is right. The history of Scotch is blends. Blended Scotch has been 450 of the 500 years of Scotch history. Um, and so blended Scotch has a real strong history, has a real kind of following. Blended malts are a bit of an in between. So blended malts are essentially that a blend of malt whiskies from various distilleries. The most popular ones that most people know will be Compass Box, are the kind of the leading light, I would say, of the kind of blended malt category. You've also got things like Monkey Shoulder and stuff like that as well. Where Compass Box very much draw on their history as blenders. From the blended Scotch point of view, and talk about flavour first. We came at it from the other side of the coin, so very much from the Loch Lomond side of things, and that history of distillation and a history of creating flavour through distillation. So for those of you that may or may not know, Loch Lomond Distillery is, for want of a better phrase, a bit of a Willy Wonka factory of whiskey. We've got the ability to make not just one or two or three single malt new makes. We can make 8 single malt new makes, 2 that should be able to call single malt, but we're not allowed to. We need to call them single grain. And we also have the ability to make our own grain whiskey on site as well. So the history of the distillery is blended Scotch. It's why we have these magnificent capabilities. So what we've done with Noble Rebel is put those skills that we've learned in terms of the distilling and the bringing flavours together that you need to do for single malts and bringing in other liquids. So you've got 3 three malts within the range, all very focused on flavour, and that's kind of reflected in the name. So you've got Hazelnut Harmony, Orchard Outburst, and tonight's dram Smoke Symphony. So it's obviously being very upfront, very descriptive about what you're going to expect from a flavour point of view. And the same with the packaging. Look, that front package, the illustration on the front of the pack, is trying to really evoke tasting notes. It's essentially a visual tasting note. So you see obviously the fire and the chili, and the red fruits coming through from there. So again, it's just trying to be very visually led on that and be very straightforward with people as to what to expect. So they're all brought together. It's at 46% non-chill filtered. And I don't think we should probably all just give it a wee nose and see what we think.
Yeah, marvelous. And while we're nosing that, I know Andrew in the chat has already said it packs a punch. So just because this is obviously one version of the Noble Rebel, and the other two, the Orchard Outburst and the Hazelnut Harmony, were two of the gold medalists in this category as well.
Super.
So you've done, as a brand, Noble Rebel has done really, really well in the blended malt category. The other one, as everyone can see on the awards page online, is Johnny Walker Green Label. So Johnny Walker's taken a bit of a drumming tonight, unfortunately.
Well, no, listen, again, even to have the three of them recognised to any extent is wonderful for us. What you'll also find, what I probably should have said, is that the vast majority of the liquid across all three is both Loch Lomond and Glen Scotia. We're in a wonderful position where, like I said, we've got the ability to recreate almost any regional style of Scotch at Loch Lomond. But that's not to say that we don't do reciprocal deals, i.e. we swap some of our casks for some other distillery casks, because it allows us to do things like this. So most of them are, bulk of the liquid is Loch Lomond and Glen Scotia together, with a small portion of reciprocal liquid. So this one is around 80% heavy peat Loch Lomond spirit from our straight neck pot stills. So brings a bit of fruit as well alongside it. 15% from the Swan Neck, brings a bit more of the body. And then the last 5% is reciprocal liquids, which I am not allowed to tell you. That is then finished in Rioja red wine casks. So what I think that does, so the Rioja just helps, obviously a finishing cask helps bring everything together. But that Rioja just brings the red fruit character, just really does just wrap it all up in this wonderful fruity element. And I think the wine character balances wonderfully with the smoke. Excuse me. Should also say 46% non-chill filtered as well, and natural colour.
Marvelous. And it does. I mean, we got Andrew in the chat says it packs a punch. We got Steph saying spicy, Kamal saying comforting, smoky malt. It is a really interesting spice because it is a kind of chili spice, like those kind of crisps or crackers you can get in the supermarket that are kind of chilled. It's a very, compared to some of the spicy drams we have on these tastings, it's a very different type of kind of spice you get in there. It's quite nice, it's quite light.
Definitely, and I think I get what you guys are saying in terms of the pack and a punch. I think the nose is peatier than the palate. And I think peat, as we all know, can be quite dividing. It can be quite polarizing, but I think it says a lot of both the first and the second whiskies that you're all having tonight, and that they're peated, and we're having them first and second. Neither of these drams are going to be obliterating your palate, as a big heavy hitting Islay can do sometimes. And I think ultimately with blends, as it is with single malts as well, it's about finding a balance. And it's using those flavours that we've got in those single malts, from the two Loch Lomond spirits and then obviously the reciprocal liquids, to bring nuances. And bring out flavours. I think that the chili spice is the most common note that everybody gets. Even if you don't say it, even if they've not read the pack, it is a very kind of clear chili spice that again is not too overpowering and not too kind of discombobulating to the palate.
No, certainly. No, and I agree with what you're saying about it, and Andrew does as well. More medicinal on the nose, definitely more peated on the nose. We were actually having a campaign meeting today internally about doing a peated campaign, and I wanted to call it Turf Wars. but they
Like
weren't
that.
up for it.
I like that a lot. Like
Um,
that a lot.
yeah, but it is interesting that there are peated elements to both the first two whiskies, and it shows. I
Yeah.
mean, I think even in my kind of, I suppose, coming up 10 years now in whiskey, attitudes towards peat have shifted a lot. Like, it's kind of one of these trends where you see in terms of types of cask finishes that are popular. The kind of growth of port as a popular cask finish and everything. I think people are much more comfortable experimenting with peat in terms of their drinking habits than they were maybe even 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah, no, totally agree. And I think it's not. I think you're right. Five or six years ago, I think peated whiskies within the market and the way people viewed peated whiskey markets, it was almost that kind of chest beating. How peaty can you go? Oh, I was drinking an 80 ppm. Oh, I want 120 ppm. But I think it is. We've come back to being a bit more appreciated for what it is and bringing the flavors, and that's why you're seeing things like more wine cask, more port cask finished peated drams. Because again, it's all about finding that balance between the peat flavors, but bringing something else. So it's not just peat. And I think for me, it's probably as ports and wines, because I really like the combination of the sweet red fruits, and the peat as well.
Yeah, definitely. No, it's you said the Rioja cask, was it in this?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah,
Rioja cask for a finish. It'll be about, I
it
think
is
it's
good.
about 6 months.
6 month finish, yeah. No, I mean, it's something. I mean, even one of Luke's brands is Rioja cask finish as well, and it's something that I up until the last few years I had never really kind of thought about too hard, but it makes some cracking because it gives a nice kind of tannic dryness to it as well. It's
Yep.
really interesting.
I think I think also historically red wine cask finishes have had a bit of a tough time, a bit of a bad name. Um, and I think a lot of that is down to it's your choice of wine cask. I think it's obviously there are red wine is a very broad category. There are almost infinite numbers of grapes and varieties and regions for that. And for me, it's very much about finding the right wine to complement your spirit.
Hmm.
And I think that's the Rioja with that smoky Loch Lomond spirit just works really well. It's one we've used a couple of times in some single casks and things. Yeah, it's a great whiskey, I think. And again, for the price point, bang for a buck, for a 46% non-chill filtered natural colour malt. No, it's not single malt, all from one distillery, but it's still 100% malted barley spirit. I think it's a great drum.
Yeah, no, definitely. So this is £39 on our website, but with the 15% you'll get off with the code at the end of this tasting, it'll be 33.15. So again, a really approachable price point on that whiskey as well. We've got some great comments coming in there. James says, was never a fan of peat, but really enjoy it now. This is great. Quite gentle, tasty, and easy to drink. Kevin and Kev says, pleasant, sweet, fruity spice, subtle smoke, lingering warm. And Whiskey Slayer says, this is a beach bonfire barbecue with plenty of smoked fruit. This has really made my mouth water, then dries quickly on the finish. Yeah, no, definitely. It's really, I mean, in terms of the other two, the gold medalists, what's the kind of big difference between all? I mean, maybe that's stating the obvious, but it would be good to kind of know what to expect if we were to try the other two.
So yeah, what I'll say is I'd be led by the name. So Orchard Outburst, that's going to be very orchard fruit led, green apples, pears. So for that, we're using a good chunk of Loch Lomond unpeated straight neck spirit. So if you think of Inchmurren, a lot of that kind of liquid kind of comes through. We're also using some of the low collection strength from that still. But a good chunk, there's about a quarter of that liquid is Glen Scotia. So that's where you see the crashing waves. So it's bringing that salinity that I think works really well. Again, small bit of reciprocal liquid in there, and that's all married together in refill bourbon. So that's kind of really highlighting that fruit character. And then hazelnut harmony is obviously kind of leaning into a nutty character. So the more classic swan neck Loch Lomond liquid. But the hazelnut's probably the one with the biggest chunk of reciprocal liquid. And then yeah, some of the kind of straight neck spirits in that as well, and that's finished in virgin American oak. So American oak that's not had any liquid in it before, and that just really ramps up and accentuates that nutty character. Adds a bit of spice to it as well. So it's trying to make it really approachable liquids. Like I said, be very very upfront about what to expect from a flavour point of view, and I think that's something that's what blending is about. It's curating and bringing together flavours that we maybe couldn't do with as single malts from either of our distilleries, and then finishing them in some nice casks that really help that as well.
Marvelous, yeah. Got a few more comments in there. Whiskey, or Gary Stewart's is very nice, dried fruits and very smoky, chili kick. Ashley's is nicer than other peated whiskies, smooth. So no, it really is good. And you've got a bit of a history with the W Club Awards, seeing as we didn't do a tasting like this last year, but you won the Loch Lomond 14 was our inaugural whiskey of the year last year. Greg is a very nice. I do like Loch Lomond, so this follows suit. So you obviously have you're popular amongst the W clubbers in terms of your liquid, because as we people can already see the lineup. There's another couple of your brands as well that have done well this year. Why do you think you're so appealing in these awards?
Probably because I've posted all of these guys and girls a fiver, specifically. No, I think we're in a very fortunate position that we've got a real breadth of liquids. And it allows us to cater to a lot of tastes, operate in different categories, in different price points, and just make some tasty juice. I think that's really it's all about, and I think as you'll see hopefully for the other two as well, reasonable price points are a big thing for me. We're making whiskey for you lovely people to buy and drink. There's no point in you buying a bottle of my whiskey and it's sitting on your shelf for 6 months. In an ideal world, you'd buy it, you'd drink it, and then you'd go and buy it again, really, ideally, but you could obviously branch out and buy somebody else's. But it's about making good liquid, reasonable price points, because the Loch Lomond group, as it is only been around for 10 years. So obviously the distilleries have been about a lot longer. Scotia, 1832. Loch Lomond's been on the same site since 1966, but Loch Lomond as a brand flies under the radar. A lot of people still view that as a relatively new distillery, and don't know as much about it. So yeah, it's really great to be able to get this variety of liquids out and in your hands and in your glasses, and trying them tonight.
Marvelous. Well, while people are kind of still nosing away in that, because while we still have you on, because with the next winner, not to rush too far ahead, is going to be the Glen Scotia double cask. So we could maybe slowly start coming on to that, because that's also you, Gary, which is the non-age statement single malt of the year. In the meantime, Ian in the chat has said, agreed, Loch Lomond Group have such a varied range of tastes and price points. The spirit is always good. They seem to have a great range of finishes as well. So yeah, Glen Scotia is obviously another one of your drams. Maybe because I don't want to rush to people off the other one too quickly. So we were just talking actually today with some of my colleagues about the Glen Scotia festival coming up in May, is it?
May,
Middle of May?
yeah, May.
Or sorry, Campbelltown Festival, but obviously there's only two distilleries in Campbelltown.
Two and a half.
Well, three
really.
now. Yeah. Sorry, try showing my whiskey ignorance there. But it is a small region. Do you always do like a festival release? You always do something exciting around that. Have you anything
We do.
to share on that front?
So the festival itself's been going for 20 years. But again, the Glen Scotia itself only really has had a visitor centre for 9 years. So we couldn't really participate to the same level. Historically, what you would have had happen before we had the visitor centre is Ian McAllister would take a fold up table across to Springbank, bring a couple of bottles that he could rustle up and pour from there. Let's say his office was really the only place you could go. Indeed, the only place we had stock was the cupboard inside his office, so there was no real shop, there was no tasting area or anything like that. But that was one of the big things for us as part of that Loch Lomond Group takeover, was to really kind of lean into Campbelltown. Just get people were coming to Campbelltown when there was only one distillery, to come visit. And for those of you that don't know, Campbelltown's not an easy place to get to. The song "Long and Winding Road" essentially is about the route to Campbelltown. It takes about, on a good day, 3.5 hours from Glasgow. You can get a 20-minute flight from Glasgow Airport, but that's if that flies. If not, you're stuck in a taxi with strangers for 3.5 hours. That's interesting. Um, so yeah, it's very very remote, but people were coming anyway, so it's capitalizing on that element, get them in the door, and let them experience the distillery. So we've kind of, over the years, grown our, so each through the days of the Campbelltown Malts Festival, much like the Fez Ale, each distillery has their open day. That's when we'll have our big tastings. We'll have stuff going on in the courtyard, so that we're not competing against each other. We are a small town. We're one community. Bringing more people to Campbelltown benefits all of us. So it's all about giving each other our space, letting us do things, but then we'll also do things together. We'll go to them and do some tastings. So you'll do three Springbanks, three Glen Scotias, and they'll vice versa. They'll come to us and do similar. And it's growing it each year. And my favourite thing about it is seeing the breadth of people that come through to this tiny wee town in the far west coast of Scotland from literally all over the world, Australia, America, across Europe. I've got friends that come from Norway, Sweden, Finland every year, to come to Campbelltown for the festival, and it's such a great celebration of the town and of the whisky heritage of that town as well.
Yeah, marvelous. So we will come on to that Glen Scotia Double Cask. So Glen Scotia Double Cask is winner, congratulations, of non-age statement single malt of the year. So well done on that front. It's also was followed in that category by another sort of situation, which just seems to be a reoccurring theme of the night. Which considering like there was like, I think 90 something entries across all of these categories for these awards. We actually split the single malt award categories into more than we had last year because we had so much volume of entries. So yeah, so the gold medalists in this were Filey Bay single malt, Talisker Port Rugy, and the Glen Scotia Victoriana. So you've
Well.
Victoriana obviously featuring in there as well. So another one of yours, which is actually from a slightly higher price point, isn't it, as well?
Yep, definitely.
So that's another theme of the night in terms of the cheaper of the kind of family
Yeah.
of whiskies winning, which was another theme from last year. We had Balblair 25 and Balblair and Old Putney 25 last year lost out because they were in the same category this year because of volume entry. We have an 18 and over category, whereas last year they were in with slightly younger whiskies. And yeah, both Balblair and Old Putney 25 last year lost to Old Putney and Balblair 15-year-olds in those categories.
Right.
So it's it's interesting that this has kind of become a bit of a theme, early developing theme from the W Club
Yeah.
Awards. But anyway, for the Glen Scotia Double Cast, do you want to tell us a bit about this?
Of course I do. This whiskey has a soft spot. I've got a real soft spot for this whiskey. This is the dram that started me on my whiskey journey. So it's technically Double Cask's fault. Um, so when we refreshed Glen Scotia, when the local Loma group came in, um, some of you guys will have been aware of the old disco cow packaging of Glen Scotia. Real bright neon packs that were fully dipped. So you'd like even the punt was painted, so you had no idea how much was in these bottles. They were mad, very very colourful. Liquid was very Campbelltown, but if I'm being totally honest, it was a bit inconsistent. There were some absolute bangers in there, and there were some meh. That's all right. So
Which
when
is also
we
very Campbelltown.
that's very very true. Touche, sir, touche. Um, so when we revamped and we restarted the Glen Scotia range, there were two driving factors behind it, and one was that all of the whiskies had to represent the Campbelltown style. So Campbelltown being one of the five regions, the smallest of the five regions. It for me, obviously I'm going to say it. I'm very biased on it. I think it's the most important historically region throughout, but it's also one of the few that still has a has a very distinct flavour profile. And to kind of caveat that, I think that the other way I kind of would put it is if you were to open a distillery in Speyside tomorrow, and your opening gambit was, I'm going to make Speyside whiskey, it doesn't really tell you anything about the whiskey. In that, I mean, it's going to be very easy to drink. It's going to be very light in terms of the spirit character, because it's got to the stage where there are so many distilleries in Speyside, that each one will do something a little more unique, take them off in a slightly different direction, but it pulls them all away from that centre of what Speyside whiskies would have been. And that's understandable. If you're competing against another 25 distilleries, you need something to make you stand out. But when there are 3 distilleries, that's not as much of an issue. So there is still that distinct character has remained. That was the first driving factor. And then the second driving factor was to make sure that these whiskies were available all year round. Again, as you will all know, if you follow Springbank at all, it's very difficult to get hold of, because their production numbers are not massive. And what we didn't want to do was to create a more Campbelltown whiskey that you could buy today and then not be able to get it tomorrow, or not be able to get it for another 3 months, 6 months, a year. So that's why, excuse me, when we relaunched the range with the first 3 whiskies, 3 of the 2 were non-age statements. So it was Double Cask, 15-year-old, and Victoriana. And this Double Cask for me is such a good, just great kind of gateway whiskey into Campbelltown, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, for me, it was almost gateway into Scotch, a bit like yourself, Gary. I was already working into Irish whiskey, but my Scottish knowledge was woeful, and I visited here for the first time back in 2017. I picked up a bottle of this on sale in a whiskey shop in Calendar, and it was like £32, and I could not believe it. I could not
Yeah.
believe. I think I've said this when you were on our Glen Scotia tasting. I was like, how is this a £32 whiskey? This is it's insane. Now now that was on special offer. I think at the time it was retailing at about 36, 38.
What about that? Yeah.
And it's obviously just, inflation and everything. It's a bit more expensive now, but it's still a great bang for your buck. It's £44 at the moment on the website. With the 15% discount code, you get it for 37.40. So another
Still
whiskey
decent.
in a really, really approachable price point in these awards, that is not good for me, because the more expensive it is, the more money I make. But that was just a joke. I don't make any money. But it's really testament to that, where people's palates are naturally eating. And we've also got some great comments to back this up in the chat. Andrew says, love it, might be hooked on this one. Christian says, same, Andrew, this is a lovely dram. Tony C says, Gary, what is GS's annual output, please? Which I'll read out the rest of the comments and I'll let you answer that. Greg said, very nice, opens up with a drop of water. Graham, lovely. Glen Scotia, fast becoming one of my favorites. Gary, brilliant dram. I'm getting apple peel soaked in sherry. This would make an amazing after dinner drink or pre-dinner drink or anytime. Easy drinking, loving this one. So some really great comments coming in. In
Love
terms
that
of
one.
your capacity output, or maybe not capacity output, your actual annual output, what would it be?
Yeah, output, we're pushing about 800,000 litres of pure alcohol this year. That's our aim, and that's pretty much at full capacity for what we've got at the moment. When you consider when Ian McAllister joined our business 15 years ago, we were producing 70,000 in a year. So he's upped that by over a factor of 10 is absolutely crazy. Just to give you an idea, the whole of Campbelltown as a region produces about 1.25 million litres of alcohol in a year. Like I said, we're 850,000 of that. So the Springbank guys they work hard, they work their stuff hard, but they're ultimately limited by floor maltings. They're the only distillery in Scotland that does 100% floor maltings, and does everything themselves from start to finish. So that's what limits their volume.
Yeah.
In terms of a bit of a liquid breakdown of the dram, so its average is about 5 or 6 years old. It's matured in first fill bourbon for the vast majority of that, and the final 9 months are spent in first fill Pedro Jimenez sherry. And what the sherry's doing is obviously bringing a level of sweetness, but for me it helps just round all those corners. It just brings everything together, and it makes it just such an easy drinking dram, to the point where I will very, very often be heard referring to this as whiskey flavoured iron brew. because it's just such an approachable for 46, and it's something that resonates through the Campbelltown whiskies for me, is that I don't think any of them drink at their ABVs. Like give me that blind, I'd probably say it was a 42, 43. I think it just drinks so easily.
Yeah, no, definitely. We got some more comments agreeing with you in there. Jack says cracking jam. Still not had a Glen Scotia. I haven't loved. Steve has said my first Glen Scotia. Very impressed. So we're glad we could be here for your first time, Steve. Andrew said that's wrong. So I'm not sure what Andrew has thought is wrong, but but there you go. Maybe you could help clarify for us, Andrew. Brilliant. No, that's really, really good. And Whiskey Slayer says creamy, oily, sea salt, the pears and apples, cinnamon, then oak, lovely dram. Brilliant. We'll be having you back on in a few minutes for Loch Lomond 18.
No
But
worries.
is there anything you wanted to say on Glen Scotia before we moved on to our 12-year and under?
Yeah, just kind of ramping up on that kind of when I talk about the Campbelltown style, the sherry finish on the double cast does suppress it a wee bit. You get it much more in the 15 and then through into the Victoriana. When we talk about Campbelltown style, it's basically a lot of the notes that everybody's picked up. It's that oily, coats the mouth. It really stays in there, full-bodied bit of spice. And then you've obviously got that sea salt character coming through as well. So that's kind of at the core of all of it. But yeah, the sherry is really what helps smooth a lot of this out for us as well, and kind of make it such an easy drinking dram. So
Marvelous. And just
thank
to
you again
clarify.
to everyone for voting.
Yeah, no, thank you. And yeah, this is it's a testament to you guys. Not to keep repeating myself, but obviously people didn't know what they're voting for, so that just, always makes it all the more special. Andrew said his comment was relating to the Iron Brew comparison. So there you go. Kamal says simply love Glen Scotia, so brilliant. That's a good
Yep.
place to leave it. And we'll move on to our 12-year and under category. Which the winner of was Bushmills 10-year-old. So as a proud Irishman, I'm delighted to see an Irish whiskey, sorry, win this. So Mark, I believe you're on to represent the brand of Bushmills, which is also another multiple winner. You've won another category here tonight as well. So thank you for joining.
No, thank you for having us. I'm delighted to be in good company as well. Some fantastic drams there beforehand. But yes, delighted to be here and chat a bit about Bushmills. I suppose I'll speak a wee bit about the Bushmills brand for anyone who doesn't know. Um, so we are the world's oldest licensed distillery, dating back to 1608. We were granted our license by King James the First in 1608, and have been distilling
He's
single
he's
malt.
King James the Sixth where I am, Mark, just to have you know.
Well, I think he's long gone by now, but um, nonetheless, we're very grateful that we were able to get that certification, and in I suppose in relative terms, that's 417 odd years now that we've been distilling single malt Irish whiskies. And fair to say that our ambition is to pioneer single malt Irish whiskies globally, and to try and lead that charge. We have some fantastic distilleries that have opened up in Ireland recently, doing some amazing things and lifting the Irish whiskey category, I suppose, globally as a whole as well. But something that we're immensely proud of is our range of our single malts. It's certainly our passion, our drive. We have some of our blended whiskies. We were speaking offline earlier on about Blackbush, for example, which is a special place in my heart. But single malt Irish whiskies are really our passion and what we drive towards. And the 10-year-old is really our entry level into that and our starting point on that one. So we're very fortunate for anyone who hasn't been to Bushmills as the village or the distillery. It's fair to say, blink and you'll miss it. It's a very small village, small population, a couple of hundred people really in the population there. We have a workforce of around 160, and around 100 of them would walk to and from work. To give you a bit of an example of just how close closely knit the community is. We're very lucky in where we are as well. I'm very proud of where we are. Situated in the north coast of Antrim, which is on the island of Ireland, on the northern easterly tip, and we're a coastal village, and we avail of that in the best way possible. Our water source, for example, is something incredibly important to us. We have the River Bush, which flows through the village of Bushmills. We took our water from a tributary off that called St. Colum's Rill, and that's incredibly important for us because that flows over limestone and basalt rock, the same as you'll find at a UNESCO World Heritage Site, the Giant's Causeway. Some people on here might be familiar with that, and that's incredibly important for us because as a building block towards our distillation, that gives us a minerality and a salinity that isn't often found with many other Irish whiskey distilleries. So we're kind of at an advantage from that first point, from the foundation. But we're also very, very fortunate in the team that we have. I often say we have two things that nobody else in Irish whiskey has. That's our master distiller, Colm Egan, and our master blender, Alex Thomas, two rock stars of the Irish whiskey industry, who often don't need too much introduction, and are truly pioneers and I would say geniuses when it comes to Irish whiskey. So we're very fortunate to have them at the helm. The whiskey that you guys have in your glass here, and I have one to join you here as well, our Bushmills 10-year-old is a whiskey that has a very special place in the heart of anybody who works for Bushmills. And there's a reason for that. Our new make spirit that we have is revered in Ireland, and I'm sure, Luke, you've tried our new make spirit.
I've tried a fair bit. It's very orchard fruits, lots of pears. It's gorgeous.
Of course, yeah. And that plays a massive part in what we do from a foundational level, and moving on to our caskings, etc. But Bushmills fans would love if tomorrow we were able to bottle up and label our new make spirit and have that available for them. And it's a very, very distinct flavor profile that we're very proud of, and we're very confident in all of our range, be that from Bushmills original, from our blends, right the way through to our prestige ranges of single malts, that you can deep delve into and really distinguish that is a Bushmills liquid, which is a fantastic thing to have in our arsenal. So typically our new make spirit will come across, like you say, Luke, it's orchard fruits, a lot of green apple, orchard pear, some zesty lemon citrus as well that we get. That comes from sort of the interaction with copper. And then a milk chocolate undertone that's always going to come from your use of malted barley. So that really builds the foundation of our spirit. And like I said, something very, very distinct. We're very proud of our new make spirit and the character, the DNA of Bushmills, as we call it. And for us, the 10-year-old is really an evolved form of that. So this is I suppose our first step into the story of Bushmills for us. The first step into the story of single malt Bushmills. And it's very light and approachable, but there's a complex element to it there as well, where you get the heathery element to it. You're still, the cogs are turning in your brain to a certain degree, and situationally this sounds like poetic nonsense maybe, but you do seem to get transported to the coastal village of Bushmills, to the distillery, each and every time you have a dram with a 10-year-old. It's really our heritage in a bottle, I suppose. This has a split maturation base between bourbon and Oloroso sherry. We have long-standing relationships with our Cask partners and our cooperage partners for this. You know, anything bourbon orientated, where we have a long-standing relationship with Kelvin Cooperage in Kentucky, which previously was of Glasgow. I know I've a couple of Scots on here as well, so the guys made the jump over to Kentucky. But we have a long-standing relationship there, where we know the quality of the casks that we're getting are absolutely incredible. Again, when we move on to sherry, all our so sherry is something we use quite a lot of as well. We have a generational relationship with the Jose Antonio Paez Lobato family in Jerez, in Andalusia in Spain. And we really have quite a special relationship with those guys, because we are at an advantage there, that we don't only hand select the casks that we get from the Paez Lobato family, but we also select the liquid that goes into those casks previously as well. So what that gives us is entire ownership, essentially, or sort of collaborative ownership over what that cask is actually going to bring to our liquid once it arrives in Bushmills. So our 10-year-old is, like I said, something that holds a special place in the heart of anybody in Bushmills, for a good reason. We're immensely proud of our DNA, that new make spirit that comes off our stills, and it's very, very distinctive and very, very sought after. And how we view our 10-year-old single malt is essentially an evolved version of that, a matured version of that, that has had some interaction with the wood, but at the crux of it, what you should get there at the base is the green apple, the orchard pear, some zesty lemon citrus, the milk chocolate forming that base. And then beyond that, there's a number of flavor profiles that come across. Melon being one that comes across, like a honeydew melon. Some peaches and apricots coming through there as well. It's a very approachable, light, heathery whiskey. Lovely amber color and a lovely aroma coming through there. It's very fruit forward. It's not going to be too taxing or too complex for you to deep delve into and break down. This is our everyday lovely sipper, our entry level into our single malt category. So it's something we're very proud of, which leads us then obviously into the rest of our single malt category.
Yeah, no, it's really, it is very complex, and you get lots of flavors. We've been getting great response in the chat here, Mark. This is Tony says finish is a wee bit short, but nicely reminiscent of juicy fruit chewing gum. Steph says I'm kind of getting Granny Smith, but then it gets sweeter than that. Just so drinkable, says Graham. Pear drops jumps on the nose for me. Bananas, pears, vanilla custard, and watermelon on the mouth. Very smooth. Gary says Oloroso and Bushmills Spirit are such a good match. I get pear. There's lots of comments about it being a fruit salad. Several people have said that, being very, very light. So it is incredibly approachable. It's £39 currently on our website, but with the discount tonight, you'll get it for £33.15. And you get it just by coincidence. We're doing a promotion online, and you get it with a free Bushmills tumbler gift of purchase. So there you go. That's a win for anyone who decides to take the plunge on that tonight when I give out the discount code. Just for context, Mark, the other whiskies in the category, and this actually maybe is something that we were discussing actually before we came live in the call, but not everyone here might be aware. So these categories we ignore borders. So it's done by the style of whiskey, single malt. Our Leaper's Fork, which we're really excited to come on to, that was in the alternative mash bill category, which could have, potentially included some single grain whiskey, some Irish pot still, that type of thing. So we go by category. So this is beaten Deanston 12. Sorry there, Luke. Annock 12 and Talisker 10. So some really, really top Scotch whiskies that are in that kind of age range and price point that it's beaten out. And just to hammer home that idea that we're not all about the the country of origin with the style. Instead, the Filey Bay, which was mentioned as being a runner up to the Glen Scotia double cask, is obviously Spirit of Yorkshire. It's an English whiskey. So you know, for the English do whiskey as well, folks. You know, we can't pretend they don't.
Well,
So
on that
yeah.
note, I mean, I would pass my thanks on to the members and stuff, and to all the voters, because we're like I said, we're immensely proud of Bushmills 10-year-old, of our our malt portfolio, sorry. And you know, this is why we do it. You know, this is why we do what we do, because we want people to be able to enjoy the years of love, passion, care, and attention that has gone into every single drop of Bushmills. You know, for me personally, I one of my statements that I say is, we're not in the business of making ornaments. We're in the business of making whiskey. And the greatest satisfaction that we can have is from people potentially trying a Bushmills whiskey for the first time, or maybe revisiting a Bushmills whiskey for the first time in a long time, and still having that same effect, still having that wow factor of this is brilliant, and I really enjoy this, and that's where we get our satisfaction from. I know that's the exact same for all the rest of the guys as well, and that's where we really get our kudos from, you know. And the 10-year-old, like I said, is our entry level into our malt portfolio. We're constantly moving and changing and innovating with a modernizing Irish whiskey category, but also a global whiskey category in general. So we're always experimenting and trying to push the boundaries as much as we possibly can in terms of innovation. But things that will be the old faithful and always return to are the likes of our 10-year-old malt, hopefully.
Yeah. No, marvelous, and it's worth. I should have said this on the double cask as well. So apologies, Gary, but we can discuss it when you're back on for the next whiskey. So for these categories, folks, for anyone watching from home, which if it's not obvious, obviously we have the winner for each category, the gold medalists. They're done by the adding up of your scores when you taste them. But then we take away all the categories and just look at the scores, and that's how our whiskey of the year is decided, and that's how our overall gold medalists are decided. So Bushmills 10 also got an overall gold medalist, so it scored high enough to beat a huge amount of whiskies, like outside of just the 12-year and under category. So that's a real testament. So did the Glen Scotia double cask, which was also an overall gold medalist. So they're even the ones we're going to come on to try next, the Loch Lomond 18 and everything. These whiskies also actually scored higher than the winners of the other categories. So that's how the gold medalists are decided. So Glen Scotia, ironically, I've accidentally given thumbs up now on this thing. Glen Scotia Victoriana, which didn't actually win a category, was scored high enough to win an overall gold medal. So just goes to show you how well received the non-age statement in the 12 and under category was amongst our W Club members. So incredibly high scoring categories. So Mark, that's really fantastic. I'm really looking forward to. I've got actually a lot of thoughts on Bushmills, being having a background in Irish whiskey myself, which will maybe share them in a few minutes with you. But because we're going to have you back on in a few minutes just to discuss the winner of the over 18 category, which was also a Bushmills. So if you don't mind stepping aside for a second, and we'll get Gary back on. So I might have to unmute you, Gary. There, I do. Yeah.
Thanks very much, guys.
So marvelous. So we'll talk to you again in a second, Mark. Thanks for that. And Gary, thanks for jumping back on. So we're jumping all over the place here. And as I say, there's a huge amount of whiskies rendered into this. So it's amazing that there's so many repeats who ended up in the scoring. So we're now at 13 years or over 12 to 18 is the category of single malts, and the winner of that category was Loch Lomond 18. As we say, last year Loch Lomond 14 won the overall whiskey of the year, won in the entire awards. And this is one of the interesting things, which may be something for people to think about, both you guys who are on here representing the brands and people attending at home. There's whiskies that scored massively high last year that didn't win this year. So it's also, trends change, people's palates change. Maybe blends drift slightly. We don't know. There's different people tasting. It's not an exact science. So it is always interesting to see what comes up But yeah, Loch Lomond 18 is our winner of the over or 13 years and over category. So yeah, do you want to introduce the brand to us, Gary? For
Yeah, of
those of us who
course,
might not
of
know, because
course.
obviously we've talked a lot about Loch Lomond on this call. We actually haven't drank Loch Lomond yet tonight. So.
Yeah. So one of the interesting facts that I kind of stuck in the chat as well for Mark's Bushmill piece, our master blender, Michael Henry, started his career at Bushmills, Old Bushmills Distillery. So he's a Northern Irishman himself. So that yeah, that was after he'd finished his brewing and distilling course. That was his first role in at Bushmills. So yeah, a wee link in there too. Um, so Loch Lomond Distillery, obviously is at is around Loch Lomond. It's at the southern kind of shore of the loch. It's unfortunately not open to the public, and a lot of that is
The
down.
lake is though. The loch is.
The
You're talking about the
the
distillery.
loch
Yeah,
is,
just to
yes,
clarify,
yeah. You
in
can
case people
absolutely
cancel their holidays. But
visit the loch anytime you want. Um, but ultimately, the reason the distillery isn't open to the public is because of I suppose it's because of the kind of layout and the kind of building itself. It's in a very similar vein to Deanston Distillery, that it's been established in the 60s when single malt started to become in the kind of mindset of the distillers, and was retrofitted into an existing building that had a water supply. So the distillery itself used to be an old dye works, an old dye factory. So the distillery building was the boiler house, so hence having the access to the water. And then a lot of the subsidiary buildings were then obviously converted into more modern warehouses. Um, Opened as a sister distillery initially to Little Mill, Lowland Distillery, 8 miles down the road. Um, and it's been a real hub of innovation. We're very proud to call ourselves Scotland's most capable and adept distillery. I think it's a really big, broad, sweeping statement to make, but it's one we're happy to back up. And as I mentioned at the very, very start, we've got a still room floor that is just unmatched anywhere. We've got 11 stills that cover 3 different styles. So we've got standard swan neck pot stills. So that's the pot stills you'll see in every single kind of other Scottish distillery that you go and visit. We also have our super unique straight neck pot stills. So it's kind of a bit like it sounds. It's a pot still base with a kind of straight column neck that's perforated copper plates inside. They are super unique to us because they were designed by the owner of Little Mill Distillery, who, when he then came across and opened Loch Lomond, installed that style of still into the distillery as well. And it just gives us a real flexibility to create different styles of malt, and put so much flavour in through distillation. And one of again, it's kind of very similar to the Bushmills, one of the overarching themes. So that if you were to sum up Loch Lomond and that kind of signature style, it's fruit, it's honey sweetness, and soft smoke is really the kind of key criteria. And this is that in spades for me. So it's been in a combination of first fill, refill, and recharred American oak. Good chunk of refill, obviously with it being 18, you don't want to get in too woody. That being said, you do still get quite a lot of the oak up front, but on the nose, you certainly get a bit of the smoke. The smoke's definitely there, so we're using some heavily peated stock to start with. I get the oak spice as well, but it's when you get onto the palate, that's when you start to get those real familiar kind of Loch Lomond characters.
definitely, it's got an incredible nose and incredible palate. The some of the theme from the whiskey so far have been quite light, approachable. This one's a proper malt. It's got that kind of depth on the nose, much more richer flavors coming through. So it's very different. James Brooks has made a really good comment in the chat there. He said your 3 winners from you guys in this awards are all over 46%. Or sorry,
Yep.
all 6 are all 46% now over it. So yeah, it's really interesting.
It's Michael likes a 46%. I think that for him is that kind of spot on butter zone. Means you don't need you can bottle it without chill filtering it. You retain so much more of the flavour, but it's not that the alcohol's not dominating your palate. It's allowing all those flavours to come through. And I think one of the things that to your point at the start of the fact that some of the whiskies that were winners last year aren't there, but when you look at the winners that are here tonight, it seems to be reasonable value, good quality whiskies, and I think that's what a lot of people always will fall back on. Fads will change, our palates will change, we'll go, but we've all got things like a bottle of black bottle in the cupboard that kind of needs to stay. A bottle of Bushmills is never gonna upset anybody. Um, it's that kind of stuff that when the kind of belts are made a wee bit tighter, you fall back to what you know and what you love and what you know you're going to get value for as well, and that's why I'm happy to say Loch Lomond is one of the few 18-year-olds in Scotland still cutting about that's either just below or just over the £100 mark.
Well, this is a good point because the age it's no secret for anyone who drinks whiskey that higher aged malts are been creeping up in price over the last few years. And yeah, at £98 we're retailing this at. It's 83.30 with your W Club Digital Drams discount. So it's more expensive than the ones you tried so far, but yeah, it's definitely really good value for what it is. It's a much more complex dram than a lot of even single malts of that age, and that's not it's not saying it's not as complex as the ones that have come before, because Bushmills 10 was remarkably layered, but it does have that richness of age. You can say, I know people say ages and everything, but sometimes you do notice that there's that bit of extra bit that comes through in there. It's a gorgeous dram.
No, undeniably for me on the palate is where the age shines through. The complexity and the length on it is very abundant. I think it keeps going in the best way. Like, it's not hanging about like a bad smell. It's just bringing those flavors through, and it's unlocking layers. Just getting into those a real creamy mouth feel. It's taken what in some of the younger liquids is a kind of green apple, orchard fruit. The combination of that additional age, the wood spice, the smoke, it gets into a real kind of stewed apple, almost into kind of strudely kind of stewed apple character. And the smoke and the peat lingers into that real nice kind of tobacco smoke for me, that not overpoweringly so. It just has a real nice balance as well. It's a great kind of end of the night whiskey for me. I think, again, it's horses for courses. Talking to Double Cask early on, and that's my any time of the day drinker, in terms of it's a whiskey that I think it was kind of Luke said at the very start. You don't always want a whiskey that you have to unpack and think about and get right into the notes, but this is one that I'll quite happily sit and nose for 40 minutes before I'm drinking it.
Yeah.
Because of the length, the depths and the complexity that's in there.
Definitely. For people who haven't looked at it, the gold medalists in this category were Old Putney 18, Fetterkern 18-year-old, and Deanston 18. So sorry, Luke Fenton again. You've been pipped for that one. So yeah, it's all up against all of those actually are exceptional single malts. You wouldn't go wrong buying a single one of them. I hope you don't mind me saying, Gary.
No, not at all. You're right. They're all good, solid 18s as well.
Yeah, no, 18, and there was 15s. There was a lot of other, including actually, there was 16s and other ones in this category. That this was one of the biggest, the peak behind the windows, the 12 years and under, the one we just had, and this category were the two ones with the most entries into it. So they really had huge competition, these categories. So this really is a fantastic dram. We've got some great comments coming in that I've been neglecting, so apologies, folks. We've got woody resin on the nose, dry but creamy on the tongue. This is quite a complex whiskey, lots going on, smoky and fruity. James says, thanks for the answer on the 46%. Beautiful woody notes, all about the taste in this one for me. Charred oak, dark chocolates, coffee and dark fruits, nice. Cream feel and a hint of licorice taste. Delicious dram, much more complex than I expected, and really nice sandalwood nose. left in the glass. Left in the glass, I suppose. Are you implying that you finished it, Leon? I see you've got the Spurs top on as well. I hope they're winning for you. The is a 0-0. Brilliant. Yeah, so there was also a comment there about Portrush. Greg says hopefully attending the Open at Portrush in July, so would like to visit Bushmills as well. So that's a nice bit of synergy between these two whiskies that we've just had on and the one we're about to have on next as well. So here, this for those people on the call who don't know, you sponsor the British Open. It is in Portrush in Northern Ireland next year.
That's
Do you want to maybe talk about your Open sponsorship for a bit? And
Oh,
then maybe
no,
when we come to the
absolutely.
Bushmills 21 mark, you can talk about best bus routes from Portrush to Bushmills.
Absolutely. The kind of open sponsorship was a no-brainer for us. I think we're now into our 8th year of that partnership. So the correlation of whiskey drinkers and golf enthusiasts, golf people that play golf, is huge. Like, it's the Venn diagram for those two things is essentially just one circle. And it's where what it helps us do is obviously we activate at the Open every year. So we have a big stand on course, where we'll sample the whiskies, and everywhere except Northern Ireland we'll sell the whiskies, but they won't let us do it over there because of the licensing. Um, and we'll release 2 or 3 special editions as well. So we'll do a non-age statement at 45 quid, open special edition. We'll do 45,000 bottles of that. That'll go around the world. We'll do an open course collection with an age statement, tends to be 20, 25 year old. We'll do 4,500 bottles of that, and that'll be in the region of 200 to 300 quid. And then the last couple of years, we've started a really limited release. So this year there will be 153 bottles, and that'll come in at a cool £1,500 a bottle for that one. That'll be a real special, much older liquid with a real interesting finish on it. And what it does as well, so we'll then put, you'll see it probably on your pack, that the open logo goes on all the Loch Lomond products. And one of the things that does for us is that Loch Lomond is a big, difficult kind of concept to pitch to people. I think the great thing about working with you guys at the Whisky Shop and the W Club is it gives us the opportunity to talk to these wonderful people, to lift the lid, let you see behind the curtain, and explain why Loch Lomond's such a unique distillery. But when you think about where a lot of whiskey is bought in some of the shops that you don't have your guys on hand to talk about them, it's literally just on shelf, and you've got somebody picking up a pack, giving it 3 seconds most consideration and putting it down. By putting the open logo on everything. If you're a golf fan, then it jumps out at you. It's one of these things is, oh, they sponsor the Open, and they'll maybe have a look at the back of the pack, and if they've done that, there it is. So if they do that and they have a look at the back of the pack, then that's half the battle for us. So it really helps broaden that kind of market for us. It really kind of piques the interest for a lot of people as well.
Yeah, no, brilliant. We've got Greg says I visited the Loch Lomond stand many times at Royal Troon last year. Great sponsorship. He says Hip Flask lives in the golf bag. So that's brilliant. Listen, thank you so much for coming on, Gary, and congratulations on your 3 award winners. It's quite the haul, and a testament, as we mentioned earlier, to your brand.
It made my choice of top very difficult. I couldn't find a branded piece that would represent all 3, so I just went crazy.
Fair enough. Well, you pull it off nicely. So it's excellent. No, really, thanks for joining. And we'll hopefully maybe get you on for. I know we've got. I think we've got a Loch Lomond planned tasting Digital Drams for between now and the Open. So it'd be great to maybe get you on. We're talking to some of your colleagues about that, so I'm sure you'll be on for that. So
yeah, absolutely. I'll hopefully see a lot of the familiar faces on again for that then.
Marvelous. Well, do stick around but it's up to yourself. And we're back to Mark now for our 18 or over 18 year category. The winner of that this year was the Bushmills 21. I must say one of my favorite whiskies of all time, and a really, really exceptional dram. I've lots of arguments, Mark, with some friends of mine in Irish whiskey who argue over this versus the 16-year-old, which is a firm favorite of Bushmills. These are
Yes.
two iconic Irish whiskies in terms of what they represent, not just in terms of their quality, but in terms of, because this actually isn't that old as a brand, is it 2004 or something it was launched? So
Yeah,
and it
yeah,
kind of
right.
represents that
Yeah.
maturity of Irish whiskey into what it is today. So please tell us about the Bushmills 21.
Of course, yeah, and I suppose I'll start on that point that I said earlier on with about 160 employees in the distillery. There certainly is a split camp in terms of favourites between the 16 and the 21. That's something ongoing. We pull people to one side or the other, given on different weeks and things like that. But the 21 is something that again we're immensely proud of. A staple in our core malt range. Where you guys have had the 10-year-old before, I'm not sure if any of the viewers that we have on here have had the 21 before, but it's a very different offering. Certainly, a lot more complex. Probably the most complex whiskey I would say that we have in our core portfolio. Um, and 2 years ago, we introduced our 25-year-old single malt and then on to 30 and 31. I would still categorize the 21-year-old as probably our most complex in terms of on your palate, on your nose. It's very deceiving, the nose versus the palate on this one. So this is our 21-year-old single malt. Spent 19 years as a maturation base in bourbon and Oloroso sherry from our partners that I had spoken about previously with Calvin Cooperage and the Jose Antonio Paez Lobato family, giving us our Oloroso sherry casks. But we've introduced then a finishing cask here for a period of 2 years, which is Madeira casks that we've got from our partners in Taco Pal in Portugal. And I'm sure all of the guys here can attest that Madeira itself is quite a challenging cask and it's quite a challenging liquid to work with. For good reason, it's a very robust liquid in itself. Has its own characteristics, and typically Madeira will always want to be the star of the show. Uh, and that's where the expertise of our master distiller, Colin Megan, our master blender, Alex Thomas, that's where the skills really come into play to ensure that the balance with this whiskey, particularly, and when dealing with a robust liquid like Madeira, that our DNA that I spoke about previously, from our new make spirit, that really sings and shouts through the liquid. So our pride is, regardless of caskings and regardless of time spent in that cask, that if you delve deep enough into that liquid, into a Bushmills liquid, you will understand that it is a Bushmills whiskey. And that comes from that DNA. That comes from the new make spirit, the green apple, the orchard pear, that zesty lemon citrus, and the milk chocolate coming from that malted barley usage as well. That will always sing through at some point. Now, with that as well, massive interactions with bourbon cask, sherry cask, that period of 19 years. And those 2 years that it spends in Madeira obviously brings a massive influence into that finished product. So Madeira, I'm sure all the guys here will know about Madeira cask finishes, what that brings to the table, and it really is a smorgasbord of flavour. There is no right or wrong answer when it comes to that in terms of tasting notes. So some of the most weirdest and most wonderful taste notes that I've got about the 21-year-old, I can't argue with. But it is a broad spectrum. You have the milk chocolate, dark chocolate coming through. There's a herbaceous note coming through there as well. So I've had rosemary, for example, which to a degree I can't disagree with. Licorice coming through. There's an element of exotic fruit as well comes through here, a certain salinity as well. This is what we categorize in Bushmills as our thinking whiskey. And what I mean by that is you might just have to take an extra couple of minutes, an extra couple of sips, delve in for a second sip, a third sip, to really start to understand what you're actually tasting. And for us, I suppose this is the epitome of a combination of flavors. This will get the cogs turning in your brain. You will have to do a bit of admin in terms of delving into what you are tasting, but this is the most exciting one that whenever I bring to a tasting, if I, for example, have 30 people in a room, the likelihood of having 30 completely different taste notes in there is very, very likely. And I can't disagree with any of them. It ranges from orchard fruit to spices to herbs to salinity to exotic fruits to tropical. This is really something that travels quite well on your palate, but on the nose will deceive you because what you get on the nose will not necessarily be what you get on the palate. So this is our fun whiskey we like to break out because for avid whiskey drinkers like we have on this call tonight, we'll probably get 30, 40, 50 different taste notes here, and you can't disagree with any of them. There's such a broad spectrum of flavors within this liquid. It's just fun to drink, and that's the main thing for us. Like I said earlier on with the 10-year-old, our satisfaction is from seeing people trying something for the first time or trying something for the first time in a long time and still having that same effect of that wow factor of I'm getting a broad spectrum from the left to the right, and it keeps on changing. It's almost like a roller coaster. From the first sip to the second sip to the third sip, it will change. It will chop and change, and keep you guessing what we're getting.
Yeah, no, marvelous, and it's gone down really well in the chat as well. Although Whiskey Slayer said, "I hope you sent all the ambassadors a tasting kit tonight." And we were discussing this before we went live. I didn't, which for next year we must sort that out. But we thought it was more important getting out to the W Club members. But Gary said it makes me want to go on holiday to Portugal. Great dram, lovely fruit, slightly buttery, carrying the taste and smooth and lasting with me. Gavin says delicious and light. Apricot on the finish, slightly chocolatey. Still prefer the Bushmills Portwood. If you ever get to Distillery Bar, it's a fantastic, and staff are so helpful. Andrew says very distinctive Bushmills flavor, strong Madeira. The 10-year-old for me, he says. So maybe he prefers the 10-year-old. Steve says, is there a Bounty Bar in there somewhere? So yeah, they got that coconut. There's that chocolatey. It's a very complex dram. Gary says, I love how fruity whiskies like Bushmills can get into the tropical spectrum at this kind of age. We've got a leprechaun has put a spell on me from Kevin and Kev. I'm not sure if that's xenophobic or not, but it's we'll take the comment anyway. Whiskey Slayer says passion fruit. I have 3 or 4 of these over the last few years. Love it. Steph says fresh paint on the nose in the most positive way. And Whiskey Slayer says this is my favorite up to now. Sorry, Gary and Luke. It is an absolutely gorgeous dram. It's £212. This also comes with a free gift with purchase with the Bushmills tumbler. So nice little bonus there. With the 15% off at the end of this tasting, you'll be getting it for 180. But it is a really, really incredible dram. Not to make this anyway about me, but I tried I was actually thinking while you were talking, Mark, while we were sipping this. The comment that was made earlier about the 46%, for the thing, I'm a big one, and as people on these call know, I'm calling myself a cask strength crusader. I love the higher ABV whiskies. I think that's where all the flavor is, and I think that's one of the reasons why the Loch Lomond whiskies are so good. I also think when people say when they taste the whiskey and they go, "Oh Jesus, you wouldn't say that was 54%," they mean that it doesn't taste so strong. I think that the Bushmills, I think this is 40%, but it actually tastes more complex than that. Having said that, with one of your colleagues, who I think has since left the company, I did 2 different Bushmills deconstructions with him over the years. You taste the different cask components, which is phenomenal. The Madeira casks, the sherry, the bourbon, and then at the end we got a taste Bushmills 21 at cask strength. and it was one of
Yes.
the nicest whiskies I've ever tried in my life. And it breaks my heart that you don't sell it. But
So
it's a great dram.
I suppose yeah, I can address that, I suppose. So there's a reason for, I mean, the two whiskies that everyone has tried here tonight, the 10-year-old and the 21-year-old are at 40% ABV. And that's for a very specific reason. So basically our new make spirit, our DNA that I spoke about earlier on, very light floral flavors, quite delicate in themselves. That's something that we're incredibly proud of having at the spine of our spirit. And we're always very conscious that we never want to lose that, be that through caskings or ABV. So that's where our team, and we're blessed with an absolutely amazing team, both in maturation, blending, etc., who ensure that there's always the quintessential Bushmills DNA in every single drop that we distill. I haven't said that, yes, what you've tried tonight is at 40% ABV. We are not averse to higher ABVs. We have a number of different whiskies that are at higher ABVs within our exclusive limited edition Causeway collection, for example. That's one iteration, which are all cask strength iterations of Bushmills, utilizing rare casks from around the world. Our prestige collection, our 25, 30, and 31-year-old, and a soon to be maybe next week or so, in addition to that, are at 46% ABV. So we really tailor the ABV to each individual liquid, and what works best with that. We have tried iterations, obviously, of what you guys have tried tonight at higher ABVs, basically from maybe 48% downwards. And we found that for these particular liquids, 40% was the absolute sweet spot. So that's the reason for that. But should you wish to try Bushmills liquid, Bushmills DNA at a higher ABV, they are available. And you can find them through the avenue of the Causeway collection. And that would be the best way to do that.
Yeah, no, and they are the Causeway collections. We've sold a few of them. We actually had a couple of Whiskey Shop exclusive Causeway bottlings. It's a really tremendous range. So anyone on here who hasn't picked them up, I do recommend keeping an eye out for them. They're really great. Yeah, no, it's a tremendous dram. And the feedback in the comments really reflect that. I'm just kind of a wee bit conscious of time, so we'll maybe come on to the next one. But if yourself and Luke and Gary as well, maybe after we try our whiskey of the year, we could all give our final thoughts before we finish, because I notice you're all still on here. But if not, don't worry about it, Mark. But it's been really, really great to have you on, and thank you. These are really great drams. It's a testament to Bushmills that you've won in 2 categories. And I wish you all the best.
Well, thank you so much for having us. We're delighted to have won the awards as well, and I'll for sure be staying on till the end. So thank you.
Marvelous. Well, folks, this is the moment you've all been waiting for, and thank you to Lee and Paul for waiting so unpatiently. We have a really absolute privilege here to be joined all the ways from America by Lee and Paul. Lee, you're not just here as a brand ambassador. You're one of the founders of this distillery, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Luke, first of all, thank you for having us on. To be included in the conversation with so many historic brands that are on this call is truly an honor. And we're probably as surprised as much as you are that we're here. Being from the States and Tennessee, but I always tell people, no matter where you're making whiskey in the world, you have to pay homage back to Ireland and Scotland. So it's good to be included in the conversation. So yes, I'm the proprietor and head distiller here at Leapers Fork Distillery, nestled about an hour outside of Nashville, Tennessee, in the rolling hills here of Middle Tennessee. So we started producing whiskey in April of 2016. So we're coming up on 9 years of production. Our oldest whiskeys are turning 9 this year. So it's interesting to see how that whiskey is maturing and progressing along. but we're very small volume. We're family owned distillery here at Leapers Fork. We only make 25,000 gallons of whiskey per year. I had to do a little calculation before we got on, and that's a little under 100,000 liters for you all. So more attention to detail and very, very small focus when it comes to whiskey for us. We pride ourselves to be of being grain to glass distilleries, which I'm sure, as far as the American market goes right now, a lot of young distilleries and non-producing distillers or non-producing brands on the market. So, for us, it's we say that we're distillers first and foremost before we're anything. So we're hell-bent on making our own whiskey. We use local. All of our grains come from within a 10-mile radius of the distillery. So we try to, as much as we can. Obviously, cask is such a huge influence of flavor, but we're trying to create as much of a terroir whiskey as we can that represents where we're sitting in Middle Tennessee. So a little bit different as far as American whiskeys go. First of all, we make Tennessee whiskey and bourbon. A lot of some of the consumers think that you can only make bourbon in Kentucky, and to the chagrin of the Kentucky Tourism Association, you can make bourbon in all 50 states across the country. We make bourbon here and Tennessee whiskey in equal amounts. We're a bottle and bond distillery, so I'll get into that a little bit later. But for half the year we make Tennessee whiskey, and for the other half we make bourbon. So it's and we sprinkle a little bit of rye whiskey as well. One thing that's different for us is we use a sweet mash process versus a sour mash process. So we're not taking spent stillage or backset from our previous run and adding that back to our mash water. So we're starting with a fresh batch of mash water every time we do a mash cook, which is a little different. There's only a handful of distilleries in the U.S. doing sweet mash process right now. And in essence, what we see with the sweet mash process is it's giving us a higher starting pH. So not adding that low pH acidic backset to our mash water is giving us a higher pH to start, which we're seeing those higher pHs translate all the way through the process, through distillation into the cask, through maturation. So obviously, higher pH and alkalinity is associated with softness. So we feel like that sweet mash process gives us a little bit of softness to the whiskey, and it's a differentiation point. One thing we're also doing as well is we use 15% toasted barley malt in everything we do. So as you well know, most American distillers use 5 to 10% malt in their grain bills, just where they're treating that barley malt as an enzyme grain. So here at the distillery, we use 15%, and we treat our barley malt as a flavoring grain versus an enzyme grain. And so kind of the way that toasting process works is after the 2-step drying process of malt, the maltster, which is actually over in North Carolina. So we're actually growing barley successfully here in Middle Tennessee. Our farmer ships it over to Asheville, North Carolina. It goes through their process, and after the drying process, it goes into a kiln. And so he's toasting that malt, which is giving us a depth of character that we're seeing shine through in that distillate, especially in the new make. You can pick it up in the new make pretty heavily. So we treat that barley malt as a flavoring grain, which makes us a little different. Also, which is kind of unique to American whiskeys, as I'm sure you all know, is we're a grain in process all the way through. So we're not creating a wash like you would in single malt Scotch. We're doing grain in mashing, grain in fermentation, and grain in distillation. Which during distillation, obviously, we have to have a stirrer that's in our still to keep those solids suspended, so we're not getting any kind of scorch. So with that grain in process all the way through, I think that's partly the reason why American whiskeys tend to be a little more robust. I feel like where single malt Scotches and Scotch whiskey tends to be delicate and light. So a lot of that robustness on American whiskey, besides the newness of the cask, is coming through in that grain in process all the way through, which is a little different for obviously Scotch whiskey. We use a Scottish swan neck still, built by Vendome Copper and Brass in Louisville, Kentucky. It's 500 gallons still. We run it twice a day. We run 2 shifts. I actually reached out to Forsyth when we were getting going, because I knew I wanted to run a pot still. And I just love the depth of flavor or depth of character that pot stills are producing. So when I reached out to Forsyth, they actually had a 2.5-year lead time at the time, and Vendome had a year's lead time. So went with Vendome, and they're obviously right up the road in Louisville. So that has been a good relationship for us. But obviously you guys in Scotland have a saying that says, the longer the conversation between the alcohol vapor and the copper, the softer the resulting spirit. And so we actually go up our Scottish Swan Neck, down our line arm into what you would call a purifier, 4-plate purifier, and we're coming off the still about 137 proof, which is a little under 70%. We do things a little different. As far as the regulations for American whiskey, we're required to go into the cask at 62.5% or less. And so for us, we go into the cask at 55% or 110 proof. And there's kind of two reasons we do that. Here at Leaper's Fork, I kind of say that we're making pre-prohibition styles of whiskey. Unlike the UK, the US had a pretty crazy period called American Prohibition that completely reshaped the entire American alcohol industry. Before American Prohibition, you had small distilleries and small breweries that dotted the landscape of the American countryside, and people consumed their local whiskeys and their local beer. And then so when American Prohibition came along, it eliminated that whole industry. So it allowed kind of the landscape we've seen up into the last 20 years, which was predominantly filled by the large legacy brands. So, but anyways, part of that pre-prohibition style that I talk about is before 1920, the barrel entry proof limit law in the U.S. Was 110 proof. It was not 125 proof. So you couldn't put whiskey in a barrel over 110. And so that's the main reason we do it. And then also kind of backing that up, Seagram's, which used to run the old, their plant in Indiana, Lawrenceburg, Indiana, which is now MGP, which is the largest contract distiller in the country. That Seagram's was making whiskey there. And they broke down the distilling industry very scientifically per each different step. And one of the things they did a study on was barrel maturation as it related to proof points. So they took different proof points from 125 all the way down to 100, filled those multiple barrels with those proof points, and studied what was going on molecularly in the barrel. And they found that at 55% or 110 proof, you were getting more efficient extraction from the barrels of vanillins and caramels and things like that. So it's more of an efficient use of the barrel. But if you're a large player and doing things on economy of scale, you're going to go into the barrel at 125 because you're able to pack more whiskey in a barrel. So by default, you're buying less barrels. But for us, we kind of view everything through the lens of what's right for the whiskey. And we don't, I say that we're inefficient by design. It costs us 3 times as much to make a barrel of whiskey than our friends in Lynchburg down the road. But that's okay for us. We don't have to sell that much whiskey to be successful, comparatively speaking. So we are a bottle and bond distillery. I mentioned that a little while ago. So back in and we love history here. I tell people, backing up a little bit, up until 20 years ago, when you thought about whiskey, you thought of Ireland, Scotland, and in no particular order. I don't want to start a fight, but Ireland, Scotland, Kentucky, and Tennessee were the 4 main whiskey making regions of the world until 20 years ago. Obviously now in Japan, there's some great whiskeys coming out of Japan. The West Coast of America is starting to have a really robust single malt distilling scene. So, but for us, we're sticking to the traditions of Tennessee whiskey and bourbon. But anyway, so in 1897, before the turn of the century, a lot of non-producing producers called rectifiers would go to distilleries in the U.S. and they would buy young whiskey. They would take that whiskey back to their shop. They would add things like shoe polish for color, turpentine for bite, just trying to mimic what they thought an older whiskey would look like. And so consumers started to really distrust American whiskeys. So distillers like E.H. Taylor, I'm sure some folks have heard of that brand, they went to Congress in 1897 and asked Congress to fix the problem. And so actually, Congress, it was the first Consumer Protection Act that the U.S. Congress ever adopted. We were protecting whiskey before we were protecting meat about 20 years later. And so the Bottle and Bond Act was created in 1897. And so that stipulates that all the whiskey in the bottle has to be made by one single distiller in one distilling season, meaning from January to June or July to December, has to be aged for a minimum of 4 years in a government bonded warehouse, and has to be bottled at 100 proof on the mark. And so that's the definition of bottle and bond. We don't use it as for a purity statement today. We use it as a statement of provenance. So obviously, consumers are a lot more educated than they used to be, 20 years ago. So it's a way to let consumers know that we made that whiskey start to finish. In the US, you can't put bottle and bond on the label unless you put the DSP of record or the distillery of record of where that came from. You could go buy bottle and bond whiskey from somebody, but you have to put their DSP on the label. So it allows us to communicate a brand story authentically, we feel like. And another thing is we're non-chill filtered as well. Somebody else was mentioning that earlier. That also gives our whiskeys, we feel like, they're robust anyway because they're pot distilled and they're sweet mashed and they're grain in throughout the whole process. But the non-chill filtered aspect of it also gives that velvety kind of mouthfeel. But in these whiskeys are a little higher at 50% or 100 proof. Like I said before, we actually do our single cask. So right now we're kind of stodgy as we're trying to create our own brand story and brand image and grow the brand. We only do our bottle and bond lineup, which we would say is our flagship. And then we also do single barrel cask strength. And most of those whiskeys, we're seeing our 8-year-olds coming off this year. They went in the barrel at 110 and coming out around 120 to 122 to 24. So, but they're still approachable, but consumers are tending to gravitate towards these higher ABVs, and so it's a way of kind of making them available for them. But yeah, so I've got Paul. Yeah, what were you going to say, Luke? Sorry.
No, I was going to say that's really fantastic stuff, and I was actually going to mention Paul's your head of education, I believe, or
I'll introduce Paul a little bit. So Paul is our head of education and our head tour guide. He's from McEwen, Tennessee, by way of right outside of Edinburgh. So he's worked with Glen and Balvenie a little bit, and so when Paul came to me, he married an American who had roots in the Southeast, and so he came by on a tour one day and asked for a job, and he's a rock star. So anyway, Paul Bissett, and I thought it was appropriate given the crowd of who the folks we were talking to, being from the UK, to have
he could
Paul
translate for you.
Yeah, he can trade. Yeah. Yeah. One thing I will say, Mark mentioned Kelvin Cooperage. So all the whiskey you're trying tonight actually came out of Kelvin Cooperage barrels out of Louisville, and the McLaughlin brothers, like Mark was talking about, moved over to Louisville from Glasgow in the 60s. And so we sell our used barrels back to them, and they're going back to the UK. So anyway, Paul Bissett.
Okay, everybody. Yeah, as Lee said, originally from Scotland via the world. I came to the US 25 years ago from Taiwan, China, where I worked. Prior to that, Saudi Arabia. That's where I met my American wife, and that's how I ended up here. And as Lee also said, I did some ambassador work for Glenfiddich and Balvenie on the West Coast in California, Nevada, and Oregon. And I also did a spell as like a self-employed whiskey guy and promoted a lot of brands independently, which I'll touch on in a moment. The first thing I want to say is to everybody that voted for us, thank you very much. I'm glad that you like what we're doing over here. We've got a long way to go to catch up with some of the other brands that have been speaking prior to us tonight. But again, thank you very much. Now, I just want to touch on this because as you were all talking, I was sitting here reminiscing. I believe that Black Bottle was the first whiskey I ever tasted. My Uncle Crawford, it was his favorite, and he gave me a dram of it the evening before I went off to join the British Royal Navy. I served for 23 years, and the first ship I was on, my best friend was from Northern Ireland, and his favorite drink was Bushmills. And as I mentioned earlier, prior to the start of this, I've actually got some Bushmills on my bar to this day. Glen, Scotia. Okay, I went over in 2016 to do the whiskey school at Campbelltown, and obviously went to Glen, Scotia while I was there. And when I came back, I'd been back about a week, and Young's Markets, one of the big distributors in California, I got contacted by a vice president there who knew me, and she said, "I've got this new drink called Glen Scotia Victoriana. Can I get some to you so you can review it for me?" I said, "Sure." I was there last week, and she goes, "Seriously?" I said, "Yes." She goes, "Of course you were." Yeah, and Loch Lomond. I actually presented Loch Lomond whiskies in Northern California for Young's Markets. And we had last year your director of innovation. I don't know if his title's right. I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he came over here and he spent about 3-4 hours at our distillery, chatted with them, got to try one of your award winners tonight.
Gary says Callum Leslie would be his name.
Yes, yeah. That's the man. Yes, yeah. Yes. The Rebel whiskey. He let me try that. So anyway, so if you have any of our bourbon to hand, I am not keen to tell people what they're tasting, and I actually don't need to because y'all tasted it and awarded us the prize. So thank you very much for that. I will say what I pick up from it. I mean, I like to tell people on tours and tastings that everybody's taste is different. You're going to pick up things that I don't pick up. And one of the things that is picked up here, I hear quite often, is pancakes and maple syrup. I'm Scottish. I've never tasted pancakes and maple syrup in my life. But I'll take your word for it. And that's more on our Tennessee whiskey. But on our bourbon, I tend to pick up things like cooked, slow-cooked stewed fruits like plum, fig, raisins. It reminds me, and I said this to Lee, I've been here about a month. Let me try a single barrel bourbon. I swallowed it and I looked at him. I said, I'm reminded of a 42-year-old Macallan single malt. And he goes, "I'll take that."
Yeah.
I said, "It's not as
much
pronounced."
cheaper version.
Yeah, the flavors are nothing like as pronounced as an older Macallan, but the same base flavors I pick up in Macallan, I pick up in our bourbon. More so in a single barrel. And on that subject, if you guys can get single barrels from us over there, some of the single barrels we put off the line are outstanding. I mean, I've tasted over 1,000 whiskeys from all over the world. At one point, I think in 2016, I tasted a whiskey from every distillery in Scotland, plus whiskeys from all over the world. And the single barrels that we're putting out here, I'd match with most things I've tasted from anywhere. So you need to press Lee and get some of our single barrels over there. They're absolutely stunning. But anyway, back to our bourbon. 23, we sent some up to Kentucky for a big competition called the Ascot Awards, hosted by the bourbon writer Fred Minnick. It was a blind taste competition, and we won Best Bourbon up in Kentucky. If you go up to Kentucky at any point in the future, look in the Ohio River. The water level is really high from all the tears of the Kentuckians, because the Tennessee bourbon whooped their butt. Okay, so again, gents, well, possibly ladies, I don't know who's out there, but whoever voted for our bourbon is very much appreciated. Thank you so much. And to all other people who won awards tonight, well deserved. I've tasted your product, love your product. And thanks for starting this all off for us and letting us come in much later than you. As Lee said, we've only been doing this for 9 years. Slange.
No, slange or slanche, as I would say. It's brilliant. No, brilliant to have you both on. And it is a tremendous whiskey. We've got I'll give the price first. So it's £85 for us retail. With your discount tonight, folks, you get it for $72.25. And the comments have been overwhelmingly positive here for this. Tony C says the legs on this are amazing, like maple syrup. Alistair said only had one sweet mash whiskey before, so my ears perked up right there, and I knew I'd love this, and I do. Lee says this is fantastic. Not surprised at all. This was a winner. Or James says, "Oh mama, I love this. Big bourbon fan. Could sip and chew this all night. Love bourbon. We have family in Kentucky." Says Ashley and Kirsty. Claire and Ian says lovely, smooth flavor in Louisville is where in Kentucky where they are. Luke Fenton says, and this is a question actually be interesting to hear. In terms of your season, you mentioned 50% bourbon and 50% whiskey. Is this one winter, one summer, he says?
Yeah, so the feds consider spring season and fall season. So spring season is obviously January to June, July to December is fall. You're getting temperature swings in both of those seasons, obviously. But yes, all that whiskey has to come from same year, same season, which makes it a little bit challenging when we're doing 250 casks per season, basically, so 500 a year. So we've got to be very intentional. We do 10 barrel blends, so which is extremely small for us. So when we say we're small batch, we're extremely small batch. So it actually puts a lot of emphasis on blending for us for consistency. We don't have a blending tank full of 50% juice that we're blending on top of every time we're harvesting barrels. We actually use a blender named Sherry Moore, who blended for Brown Forman and Jack Daniels for about 30 years. So she's helping us out. But 10 barrel batches, very small capacity.
Can I chip in here?
Yeah.
You all know there's a difference between what Lee's calling blending here than what you're blending over there.
Yeah,
this would be more like a single malt.
And really, the terminology is marrying barrels.
We call marry it. Yeah. No, it's brilliant, and the in terms of as you say, terminology, what you were mentioning earlier on about E.H. Taylor and the Bonding Act and everything. This is really fantastic stuff, because obviously whiskies, it's a truly global commodity in terms of, you mentioned Japan, but also the fact that the barrels come from Spain or wherever, and for Irish and Scotch whiskey, they were always, more people, it was exported to more countries than it was drank domestically, always. And there was this kind of knowledge transfer around distillation. So it's really great to have a whiskey like this on here that's part of that shared tradition in terms of the Kelvin Coopers and everything. It really makes it special. We have some more great comments in there around how good this is. David says, "Oh my God, it's fantastic. Cereal sweet nose, cereal dash sweet nose translates to the palate. Thank you for making it such a great bourbon." There's actually too many. I would love to read them all, but I won't, because I'll bore you to tears, because there's so many there about how good this is. A lot of them also about how it doesn't taste like 50% ABV, that it's much more approachable than that. Which is testimony. I must say, I tried this when we only started listing sometime early last year. And when we first did, there was a sample bottle knocking around the office, and I got my hands in it, and I was blown away. It was both Tennessee whiskey and the bourbon. And I was like, this is, even by the standards, so there is a bit of a golden age for kind of bourbon exports in terms of, I won't mention, there's loads of other brands that not just the established ones, but more niche ones that we're getting over here nowadays. And this he did stand out as being like really, really proper quality. And I think the fact that it was a blind tasting really is testament to that. So really, congratulations, guys, and I hope this kind of opens W Club members' eyes to your brand and to what's possible on the market as well.
Absolutely. Well, we appreciate it. Like I said, we're fans. I drink Scotch whiskey and Irish whiskey as well. So yep. I'm not just beholden to bourbon and Tennessee whiskey. I love the universe of whiskey and the history and the heritage behind it. So it's I've always wanted to visit. I want to go see Mark at Bushmills at some point. I've been allotted to the distilleries in Scotland, and we go over about 2 weeks a year and work the market with our folks, with Paul Roger, who's our distributor over there. And so it's been really fun going over. It's kind of terrifying renting a car, I can tell you that, and driving around the Highlands, but it's you've got a special place over there.
Can I just throw in here, Gary? I mentioned to Callum Leslie that you've got the seaplane that takes from Loch Lomond, goes up the coast to like Skye and whatnot.
Yeah.
You've got the Loch Lomond distillery.
Yep.
You've also got Bushmills.
It's Scotia.
No, Scotia and Bushmills. You should organise a plane trip to fly to Scotia and then fly over to Bushmills.
So you can. Well, I think I don't know what the swells around that kind of area. So we've talked about doing for the Open. We've considered doing trips from Campbelltown across to Portrush, but from what I hear, the swell coming into Portrush is not a pleasant thing to be experiencing.
You can
in a big boat, never mind a rib.
You can land on the big loch there. Was it?
Having been on that boat previously, when there's a swell, It's not too smooth, but we will find a way to get you there. Sure.
We'll make it happen.
Yeah.
Well, it's
We'll make it happen.
interesting because back in the heyday of Campbelltown and Irish whiskey, both of which are hopefully will come their heyday again. A lot of distilleries were co-owned. A lot of Northern Irish based distilleries, or what's now Northern Ireland, owned or were owned by the same companies in Campbelltown. Campbelltown was, as most people on this call will know, was a mega distilling area, even though it's only 3 nowadays.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Did I hear recently there's a 4th distillery being built?
4th, 5th, and 6th.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Should be good. We look forward to it.
That's wonderful because it's a small town and there's nothing else around there, so
Correct.
that'll be great for the folks to get work.
Correct. Exactly. So.
Well, everybody, it's been a pleasure.
Yes, no, it's been a special tasting. We've a couple of comments there about how we should do 7-dram tastings more often because we don't normally. For context, for people like yourself, Lee and Paul, and that or even Mark, who might not have been on these before, we normally do 5, maybe 6. So 7 is an exception. The discount code, folks, for everyone on here to get the 50% off is WS25CA. So Club Awards, if you're trying to remember, Whiskey Shop 25 Club Awards. So that will get you 15% off all the drams you tried. As we mentioned at the start, up until September, you'll get 10% off all the winners and the gold medalists. That 15% only lasts for 2 weeks after this tasting. You had to have purchased the pack to avail of it. But please do. There's been some really great comments there, folks, about how good the drams are and how brilliant your contribution has been. We normally, at this stage in our normal tastings, we tell people, and people have been already doing it for the last few minutes in the chat, kind of giving their preference of order. But I think the members have already spoken on this one, folks. So we already have an order of preference. But really fantastic for joining us. This is, I suppose, the end of the tasting. We don't have to end it here. I suppose I've unmuted you all. Is there any thoughts in terms of what you've heard tonight, or anything you want to feed back on, or what's been said in the chat?
I have a quick question, if I may. I'm hoping to get back over to the UK next year, or filling out the year after. Do you have any an in-person big get-together for all the club members or anything like that at any point, an annual thing?
So we do, but not an annual thing, no. So we've got there was about 60, there's now about 52 people on this call. So we've actually got about between 3,000 and 4,000 members of the W Club, but they're all based all over the country. So we do, some of the stores do local monthly tastings or kind of bi-monthly tastings in their different stores and stuff, but it's very spread out gang. I mean, we're on the Digital Drams community, we're quite small, but we do regular small tastings in each store location. So depending where you're, basically, if you're in Fort William or Inverness or in Nottingham, Manchester, Edinburgh, Glasgow, you could meet some W Club members and do a tasting. But we don't do a big annual get together. But definitely, I mean, if you guys are over, we'd love to have you along to one of our tastings, depending where you are, like 100%.
You should do an annual tasting and rotate it. Scotland, England, Ireland, Wales, each year. Rotate it around. If you've got that many members, you'll get that.
No, we do, and I suppose these tastings were the judging was done in person for all of this, in different stores all over the UK, including in Cardiff in Wales. So the members do meet up regularly. It's just in a more fractured basis.
I would also extend that I'm sure my colleagues from the other distilleries will do the same thing. But if you're ever in Scotland and you want to visit any of our distilleries, Luke will quite happily share my email address with you, Paul there, and Lee. You're more than welcome to visit us at Deanston, Bunnahabhain, and Tobermory. All I'll say on the whole thing is and I will take this point, is that we've got gold awards or category winners from CVA Spirits for 4 out of the 27, which I don't think is too bad. It's almost as good as Loch Lomond and Gary has been doing there, which is fantastic. But please do go and visit these places and try these whiskies. Luke and the team at the Whiskey Shop do such a tremendous job of promoting good liquid. It's not about the marketing. It's not about the stuff on the website necessarily. It's about the liquid you taste and what you enjoy. And you guys out there that are doing the voting are doing a fantastic job in just recognizing that liquid. So please keep doing what you're doing, and thank you so much for nominating us in the first place, giving us gold medals, and making us category winners as well. I think that's super important to recognize. And the brilliant thing is it's all blind. It's all blind. And it all comes down to liquid at the end of the day. And that's what we're all working very, very hard to do. So thank you.
Thank you, Luke. We'll take you up on a visit for sure.
Absolutely. You're more than welcome.
No, definitely do. Yeah, if you're over, you have to get in touch. I insist. No, and thank you for the kind words, Luke. I'm very fortunate in my role where it is more about experiences like this than sort of cold numbers or KPIs. So this is why the awards, we're very fortunate that my bosses are able to allow us to do this thing, which isn't based on margin or this, that, and the other agreements, deals. This was all decided by the quality of the liquid. There was nothing else. I know I said that at the start, but it's worth repeating because it is unique in whiskey in terms of you didn't have to buy an expensive table at the award ceremony to ensure you get named on stage or something, But then the downside is we don't have those big industry tastings. But the reason we wanted to bring this digital, and maybe next year for this year's awards, we might even try and go bigger with the digital presence, is because we don't want, as people in the chat have said about where they're based around tastings and store tastings, it'd be great to have people to, the virtual version, although it's not ideal, it democratizes, because people who bought these packs are everywhere. You didn't have to travel to London or Edinburgh or whatever, and everyone can join in. And it doesn't just become an industry loving on the night, so we're all here with our W Club members. So as Whiskey Slayer said in the chat, been doing these tastings for plus 2 years, and this stands out. So that's a testament to the lineup here today. So it's really great.
Well, if I can, I'd love to extend an invitation to anybody here as well who hasn't been to Bushmills, or maybe who have been and want to come back, to please come to the distillery. We'd love to see you. This has been a fantastic tasting as well. So thank you, Luke, for facilitating this. But we'd love to see you at the distillery. You can see the passion that we have in our home as well. And I hope to get traveling as well to some of the other distilleries as well, and try some of the rest of your liquids as well. But tonight has been fantastic. So thank you very much, Luke, for putting this together.
No, thank you for joining, Mark. Brilliant.
Yeah, nice
Gary, it's
job.
your turn to say something soppy.
2 Irish lads together. What do we do?
If you find yourself in Middle Tennessee, please come visit us as well.
Yeah.
I might book a flight very soon.
Come on over.
Yeah, come on a Friday, Saturday, or Sunday afternoon. We've always got live music playing here.
Okay, you have me sold.
What kind of music?
It's light. Sometimes we've got a little bluegrass band going on, a lot of people come from all over the country. So, obviously bluegrass is very indicative to Tennessee and Kentucky. So we have a lot of that, but most of it's just instrumental type of light stuff. We have such an amazing talent of the music industry here in Middle Tennessee. So we have singers and songwriters everywhere. We do these, we used to do these stillhouse sessions where we would have singer-songwriters in the stillhouse, and it was like an MTV Unplugged type of set. We had to cancel it right during the pandemic. But the last person we had play in the stillhouse was Chris Stapleton. He's our neighbor down the road, so that was kind of cool having him in here. But you don't ever know who's gonna kind of pop in and play a little bit.
I'm the biggest Chris Stapleton fan that you will find.
Yeah,
I've seen it three times. So
yeah,
you have me sold.
His brother-in-law's on the payroll at the distillery, so we got a kind of cool connection to him.
Awesome.
Yeah. Country music and bourbon, it sounds terrible. I'll just have to
Actually, if you come out between April and November, the last Friday of the month, we have cigar nights.
Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, Paul. Sorry, no, a couple of people mentioned in the chat about a warm nights accompanying a cigar was said a couple of times in the chats for when we were sipping on the Lieberswork. So yeah,
we have a local guy coming out here regularly. He sits and hand rolls cigars all night long, and we've got a 5-year-old bourbon in a dark rum cask at the moment. It's going to be our cigar whiskey on the bar. We tried it at the 10-month point. It's coming out.
Remember, W Club members, that Luke here is obviously the manager of W Club. That he puts whiskey out to you, but he could also put cigars.
Absolutely.
Really? Yeah, cool.
Yeah, we could if there's a demand in the W Club for cigars, I'll sell anything, lads, you know.
I'm a cigar guy. I'm the guy that hosts the cigar nights. So yeah.
Well, as Luke said there, so for the next Tubmori or Legic tasting, he's going to a free gift of purchase supplied for by Luke. Yeah, brilliant. No, folks, it's been the feedback in the chat's been amazing. It's been really special night. There's a couple people saying about next year, and we definitely should do this every year. It's been a great inaugural event. So who knows, in a few years when these awards are the most important game, it's San Francisco Whiskey Awards. Who are they? Like, it's the W Club Awards through and through. We'll all meet up and celebrate. But it's been really great to have you all on. The discount code again, folks, for anyone who misses, WS25CA. So that'll get you 50% off all the whiskies. But really, thank you for everyone for joining, especially our friends stateside. And hopefully get you on again soon.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Brilliant.
you.
Cheers, folks. We'll see you.
I'm going to jump down and check if there's a 4 o'clock. I said I'd do it.